You're listening to No Huddle Radio, the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Kean. In addition to this show, I host Locked On NHL, and Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, busy time for the Green Bay Packers. We are in spring and a little more than a month away from the NFL draft, but right around a month. Hard to believe how fast this offseason is going by.
Yeah, it is crazy, Gil, where it just seems like it's one day after another. And before you know it, it's going to be NFL season. So before we get started, a few words about our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packer game tickets, go to packerstalk.com. That's packerstalk.com/tickets, or browse their website at theticketking.com. That is theticketking.com. Before you know it, Gil, you're going to need that Ticket King app because we're going to be in preseason, we're going to be in training, or we're going to be in training camp, then we're going to be preseason, then all of a sudden the regular season is going to be here, and then the Packers are going to be hoisting a Lombardi trophy, So that's, such is life.
I am looking forward to that day for all of those things to happen once again. And, they're going to release the schedule probably in about, a month? I mean, it should be coming soon.
You wonder if the Packers are going to get that Brazil game.
I hope not.
Where it'll be interesting, where I could see the NFL could go so many ways, because I think the Eagles, they know for sure, are going to be hosting that Brazil game.
Right.
So the Packers wouldn't have to give up a home game, which Mark Murphy and Green Bay doesn't like to do, which they shouldn't have to do because the season ticket waiting list is so long. My wife and I are in under 15,000 on the list, by the way. So we're slowly climbing our way up. But if with Philly, they could host Dallas or Washington or the Giants, or there's a lot of matchups they could do. But Green Bay is a possibility. Maybe they'll go to Brazil.
They tend not to like to move division rivalry games.
Correct. Yeah.
So what I heard was it was either going to be the Packers or the Browns.
Okay.
Going to Brazil. I hope it's not the Packers. I don't want to open the season on a Friday night. It just, not my thing.
But here's the positive though, and we're not even at scheduled release time. We got a whole itinerary an agenda to fulfill today, Gil. But
I know.
But the thing is with that though, is it's kind of like how it annoys people that the Dallas Cowboys, the only Thursday, they get the Thanksgiving game on Thursdays, but besides that, they don't play any other Thursday games. And the one Thursday game they got in the last few years was against Tampa in the season opener,
right?
When Tampa was coming off their Super Bowl win. And it's like they had 2+ weeks to prepare for that game, where it's like Green Bay, you'd have 2+ weeks to prepare for that game and adjust. But there's not really a big time change either. It's just directly south, essentially. So that's you're not going to Europe in the middle of the year like they did a few years ago, where it actually, I wouldn't mind it. It'd be kind of cool. And again, it's like you wouldn't have to give up a home game for it, which is the biggest thing.
That is, and I guess if you're going to do it, week one is as good a time as any. I guess the question is, with the long trip, it may not be a time zone change, but it is a long trip. Does that affect your preparation for week two? And yes, you get an extra day and a half to prepare, but I would say that the long trip and the fact that it's not your routine would also have a negative effect on player preparation.
I will say, better to be out of funk in September than be out of funk in December, as the Packers proved last year. And speaking of last year, a familiar face from the last few years who is returning to the Packers, Gil. It's our good friend A.J. Dillon, running back A.J. Dillon, Quadzilla. He signed a 4-year qualifying contract to stay with the Packers, but it's not really a 4-year deal. It's essentially a one-year deal with very little cap ramifications. The Packers were to move on at any time. It wouldn't really hurt them too bad in the long run. Essentially, A.J. Dillon is getting paid like a long snapper, Gil. Dillon, in his career with the Packers, 4 years since being drafted out of Boston College in round 2, he's rushed for over 2,400 yards, averaging 4.1 yards per carry, 16 rushing touchdowns, Also has caught 86 passes for 763 yards and 2 touchdowns out of the backfield as a receiver. Gil, what are your thoughts on A.J. Dillon being back in Green Bay?
As far as I'm concerned, I think this is a good move because it is a low-cost move. I like A.J. Dillon as an RB2. I don't think he really is dynamic enough as a runner to be a solid RB1, but as RB2 for a very low amount of money against the cap with a very low risk, like even if they want to move on from him and cut him in this year's training camp, it wouldn't cost them all that much to do. So to me, Dillon is steady. He does the little things right. He's good in pass protection. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He will get you the yards that the offensive line gives to him, but he's not dynamic. So I like him. He's a good guy. He's good in the locker room. He loves being a Packer, which is always a plus. But if Josh Jacobs were to get hurt, I'm not so sure, unless it's raining or snowing, that I want A.J. Dillon to be the guy getting 20 carries a game.
But I will say A.J. Dillon is at his best when the weather gets colder,
right,
which is a huge benefit. And I do love this deal where it gives the Packers a lot of flexibility. And the big thing with this too, where A.J. Dillon, he had a bit of a rough year last year. He averaged a career low 3.4 yards per carry, and he wasn't as good of a runner. He's tripping on his feet quite a bit. The thing is, his job is not safe. It's not safe at all. And if anything, this should be motivation for him to get his stuff together, because he knows he's got to know his job isn't guaranteed either. And if you think with this deal that the Packers are not going to draft running backs coming up in April, you're dead wrong. They're going to draft a couple still. They are going to look for other options to improve at that position. Brian Gutekunst, it was rumored last year that they made a hard push for Jonathan Taylor. And obviously, they signed Josh Jacobs on the first day of the legal tampering period during free agency. He's made it one of his top objectives to improve the offensive backfield. And A.J. Dillon's job is not safe. Now, I will say a big thing for him, though, is that A.J. Dillon knows how to pass protect. And if Josh Jacobs historically has not really been a good pass protector as a running back, we don't know enough about Emmanuel Wilson if he can pass protect as a running back, but we did see flashes in the preseason last year that, hey, this guy is willing to get in there and lay someone out if need be and pick up a blitz if need be. It's his job, I feel like, is going to be very dependent on if one or both of those guys can pass protect as well as A.J. Dillon, because A.J. Dillon's very good at that. And if he's the only one on the roster who they feel confident putting in there on a third and long or a clear passing situation, he's going to have a job, but it's not guaranteed.
No, it's not. But I'll take it a step further. I think you're right. Gutekunst will still add at least one running back, probably on day 3 of the draft.
Yeah.
But if something happens where, that running back gets hurt or doesn't make the team, if I go into the season with the top 3 running backs on the depth chart being Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, and Emmanuel Wilson, I'm more than happy with that trio.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And we know Josh Jacobs, what he could do. We've seen it where he never really had a quarterback. He never had consistent quarterback play in Vegas, and he was still very productive out there. And that's a testament to Josh Jacobs. That's a good runner. He's a good guy to have in the locker room. It sounded like when the Josh McDaniels stink was just increasing more and more before he got the axe in Vegas, that Josh Jacobs sounded like one of the guys who was trying to keep that locker room together. So you know what you're getting there in the locker room. Emmanuel Wilson, there's a lot of excitement there, but it's just a matter of, can these guys pass protect very often? Because a rookie running back, not a lot of rookie running. I can't remember the last time a rookie running back showed that, hey, they can be a good pass protector and a willing pass protector as well. A running back's got to be able to protect the quarterback. Quarterback's the money position. You got to be able to protect that guy under center.
Yeah, and look, you remember Aaron Jones? That was his big challenge as a rookie, and why he didn't get on the field. And he just said, I am going to learn this. And it's really 2 things that the running back has to learn. Number 1 is technique. How do I best block? Because you're blocking guys who are usually bigger than you, and they're getting a head start. They're moving fast, and you're standing more or less still when you have the point of contact. And the other thing is how to read the blitzes and who's coming and who do I pick up first and all of that stuff. If there's a blitz, if there's a stunt, which gap do I have to take first? How do I coordinate with the offensive lineman? All of that stuff goes into the equation, and that's why it's not easy for rookies to do that. Rookies can learn how to run pretty quickly. There's not a lot of difference between carrying the ball in college and carrying the ball in pro. Pass receiving, a little more difficult. Pass blocking, a lot more difficult.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's different positions where rookie tight ends have trouble blocking in their first year. It's a huge adjustment from college to the NFL. You're going from amateurs to, well, kind of amateurs now with NIL, but you're going from amateur play to professional play. And I think the big thing is being willing to block. And the thing is with AJ Dillon too, Jordan Love was one of his groomsmen in his wedding a few years ago. So he's going to be willing to block for Jordan Love. That's his guy. They were in the same draft class. They're buddies. It's just a matter of, will other guys be able to show that? That's going to be one of the main battles to watch in training camp coming up in August, where people are going to have a magnifying glass just zoomed in on AJ Dillon, because that guy's job is not safe. I hope he plays to the level of a second round pick. I really hope so. It looked like he was going to get to that level in year 2, but he's just gotten a little worse. His play has declined a little bit the last couple of years. And I'm hoping the best for AJ Dillon. I'm hoping this move just ends up being a huge savings for us in terms of quality of play if he could get back to where he was going towards his second year. But other roster news, the Packers, they also re-signed today, and this is Thursday, March 21st that we're recording. They re-signed linebacker Eric Wilson, backup linebacker, key special teamer. I like this signing, Gil. It was rumored that the Packers are trying to make him a priority to keep in-house, and they were able to do that.
Yeah, I like this move too. He's like you said, a core special teamer. He adds a veteran presence. Look, do I want Eric Wilson to be my starting inside linebacker? Mm-hmm. No. But if somebody gets hurt, can he give you a couple of quarters of play without really hurting your team badly? Absolutely. So as far as I'm concerned, a solid signing. He'll give you that special teams play, a great Rich Bisaccia guy, and having him back makes a lot of sense. Again, you're not breaking the bank here.
There are 2 plays from this past season why I'm happy with Eric Wilson being back. And I think what I'm going to talk about, where he filled in at inside linebacker in that Monday night loss against the Giants, but had a big 4th down stop on Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
And then he also had a big fumble recovery in the playoff game against the San Francisco 49ers after Keyshawn Nixon had a huge return, got a little greedy. He lost control of the ball, and Eric Wilson jumped at it immediately. The guy hustles. He plays hard and he hustles, and that's what you want from a core special teamer and a backup player, a backup who essentially is ready for his opportunity when called upon.
On that fumble recovery, he looked like a heat-seeking missile. There were 3 49ers around the ball, and all of a sudden this white streak comes onto your screen and pounces on it first. So I respected that play a lot, and it was a big play at the time.
And I was at that game too, and I had Keyshawn Nixon was running towards our end zone where we were sitting, and we saw the fumble happen. Then we saw Eric Wilson. It was a blur, and he just jumped on that, and he slid about 5-10 yards. That's how fast he was going, and it was wet. It was rainy and misty in Santa Clara, so he slid pretty good. But there was a lot of momentum behind that slide, and that's just everything you kind of need to know about Eric Wilson. It's obviously probably a minimum deal. And if Rich Bisaccia, who has a lot of power in the Packer coaching staff, if he likes him, he's got a spot for a long time there.
Yeah, and it's good to see. And you take it with guys like that, you take it 1 year at a time. So, if he does falter, you just move on. And, hopefully he has another productive special teams year. And you like having guys like that back on your roster.
And Packer free agent updates still available from last year's team on the free agency market. Backup running back Patrick Taylor, former 3rd-round pick tight end Josiah DeGuara, obviously offensive tackle David Bakhtiari, who was released on the first day of the legal tampering period for free agency, and safety Rudy Ford, all still available. The Packers did re-sign backup corner and another special teamer, Robert Rochelle, And then offensive tackle Yash Nyman, who looked like the future at left tackle until Rasheed Walker took that job and really secured it last year. He signed with the Carolina Panthers. For Yash Nyman, I liked what he did in Green Bay. I thought he should have started in the playoff game against the 49ers in 2022. I'm still very butthurt about that, Gil, because I felt like he was one of the best 5 on that team that year, and he should have played. And the Packers offensive line was so overwhelmed with an injured Billy Turner at left tackle and Dennis Kelly, an old man Dennis Kelly at right tackle. Yash Nyman, though, I feel like going to Carolina, that's a good place for him.
Yeah, and you wonder if he'll start there. It's sort
I think he
of up in
will.
the air.
I think
but
he will.
I hope he does. I've always liked Yash Nyman. I think the Packers were right to move on from him under the circumstances. Under no circumstances should they have paid him what he got from Carolina. I could not imagine the Packers matching that number. But as far as watching him develop over the years, until this year, which was a bit of a disappointment, it was fun watching him grow as a player and go from a guy with a lot of natural ability, but not a lot of experience and not a lot of technique, to seeing him get better and better each year and take on a bigger role.
Yeah, and with Yash Nyman, too, he has shown that he could play at the NFL level. And the Panthers are the worst team in football last year. Big reason for that was their offensive line was a disaster. They have, I believe, Ike Ekwonu is their starting left tackle, and he was a top 10 pick, and he's been a huge disappointment. And it's a new regime in Carolina, and Yash Nyman, I could see him getting an opportunity there. And I hope he does well, because I did like him. But now it's what Yash Nyman was a few years ago, I feel like, is what Caleb Jones is going to potentially be now for Green Bay, where maybe could this maybe, Gil, be a sign that, hey, Yash Nyman, your time has passed here, but it could be a sign we're ready for Caleb Jones to be a backup swing offensive tackle. Seriously, I mean, that's my thought behind it.
Well, I think that's part of it. And then I think another part of it is we're most likely going to see Brian Gutekunst drafting an offensive tackle either on day 1 or day 2 of this draft, and probably again on day 3.
If he could find another Zach Tom in round 4, that would be fantastic. That's where David Bakhtiari was found too. And Gutekunst, again, it's like, he's had his warts. He's not perfect, but finding offensive line talent late in the draft, he's been pretty good with Rasheed Walker, with obviously Royce Newman is not included in this, with Zach Tom. David Bakhtiari, he was the guy who advocated for him when he got drafted. Just he's done a good job late in the draft finding. John Runyon Jr. was another guy too, who now signed with the New York Giants on a big contract. So, Gil, the roster's getting more full, and the Packers do have some cap space to work with. We're in that second wave of free agency. We're past that first week, the craziness where now you see guys who may get some have to sign team-friendly contracts because they're not getting anywhere. They're not signing anywhere. Last week I mentioned how I'd like the Packers to sign safety Cameron Curl from Washington. He signed with the Rams. Last week I talked about Jordan Fuller from the Rams. He signed with Carolina. Devin White from Tampa. He signed with Philly. Kevin Zeitler, Milwaukee's own Kevin Zeitler, who I played against, who he whooped my ass on the football field. He's not with the Baltimore Ravens anymore. He's with the Detroit Lions. He was a guy I wouldn't have minded giving a call for some interior offensive line depth. Gil, who are some available free agents that maybe the Packers should maybe give a call now and try to get a pretty favorable team deal?
Well, one that I think should be brought in or brought back, and I did write about this for Cheesehead TV, Rudy Ford. To me, you need a safety. You can probably sign Rudy Ford at a team-friendly deal because he hasn't signed anywhere else yet. He knows he may not know Jeff Hafley's system, but he certainly knows a lot of the teammates that he'd be playing with. He led the team in interceptions this year, okay, with 2, but he did lead the team in that category. And even if you draft a safety and Rudy Ford doesn't start, he can participate on special teams, and he'll give you experience depth. Look, if you have Rudy Ford, he's not going to kill you out there. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler, but he'll give you an experienced, steady guy. And even if he keeps the seat warm until the draft pick is ready in week 7 or week 12 or whatever it is, he'll contribute and he won't kill your team. And To have him and Xavier McKinney as your starters is an upgrade over what they had a year ago.
And with Rudy Ford too, he's an excellent special teamer. He's an excellent gunner. He's very fast. He really embraces that role on special teams, and he embraces being a special teams player. And you can put him in at safety if you're in a pinch. He had a couple interceptions against Dallas his first year in Green Bay a couple years ago, where two huge red zone interceptions that really made a difference in that game. And like you said, he had a couple interceptions last season too, where you need to put him in. I don't feel terrible about it. It's not ideal, but if you need someone, I don't feel terrible about it. Now, outside of the Packers organization, guys that are still available, Micah Hyde, former Packer, he ended a 7-year run with Buffalo. It doesn't sound like he's going to be back. Young safety Julian Blackmon from the Colts, he's still available. And veteran safety Justin Simmons. And Justin Simmons is a guy who we've talked about numerous times on this podcast, where he's just such a steady presence on the back end of a defense. Why not bring him in to be that veteran of this defense and be next to Xavier McKinney? We're at this point in free agency where Justin Simmons obviously isn't getting a lot of interest, and maybe he's not getting great offers, or I don't know what it may be, but you could maybe do an incentive-laden deal with a guy like this, where you sign him to a small 1-2 year deal, and then if he reaches a certain amount of interceptions or tackles, whatever it may be, he earns a little more money throughout the year. Justin Simmons is a guy I wouldn't mind giving his agent a call still. I know he's not the same player he was a few years ago, but him and Xavier McKinney would be instant upgrades to the safety position from what they had a season ago.
Oh, significant upgrade. Upgrade. So, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't mind giving him a call. Again, depending on how much it costs.
Yeah, and it's always money. It's always about the Benjamins. You got to follow the money. But a couple other guys who are still available at corner specifically, former Dolphins corner Xavier Howard, 2-time All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler, 29 career interceptions in 8 years with the Dolphins. He does turn 30 in July. I know Gutekunst doesn't like to pick up the older veterans unless they're really cheap, but that's an option too. Quarterback Adoree Jackson, a former first-round pick of the Tennessee Titans. He played with the New York Giants the last few years. He's available as well. Kind of an overrated name, in my opinion. I think his name is bigger than it is just because he was a former first-round pick.
Right.
But he's a guy who has started for 7 years. And if you need a depth piece at corner, for the right price, he could be okay. The only concern I have right now with the available free agents, there's not really any off-ball linebackers available right now in free agency. And you may have to consider, if you're Brian Gutekunst, and we may talk about this going into draft night, or maybe it's going to come up a few weeks later, where you may have to consider trading a pick for an off-ball linebacker.
It may be what you have to do. We'll see. The other option that we don't know yet is who gets let go June 1st.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a player or two that, Gutekunst has his eye on and says, okay, swooping in, going to grab this guy. And, we don't know who it is yet, but there are some guys who could become available who are not yet available because the draft is not very deep at off-ball linebacker this year.
You wonder, too, where it felt like Gutekunst kind of reached for Quay Walker a couple years ago because of a need there. Maybe he does the same thing. And Brian Gutekunst was a linebacker when he played football back in the day. And I'd like to trust his eye for linebacker talent because he played the position. He knows what you kind of need, and he knows what kind of mentality you need to have too. And they are talking to some off-ball linebackers in pre-draft visits too, specifically Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M.
Yes. It's interesting what you said about Quay Walker, because I thought about what De'Vondre Campbell said in his interview, where he said, Quay Walker, they're making him think too much out there. He's got the ability. They're just not letting him use it. It'll be interesting to see if Jeff Hafley changes that equation in his system and how Quay Walker responds. But hopefully we see more of the potential from Quay Walker actually realize itself on the football field when this season gets underway.
I like Quay Walker a lot too. Big guy who can run very fast. And I think too, it's like hopefully Jeff Hafley could just unleash him, because I feel like he could be a real good player in this league and a real good linebacker for the Packers. But going away from the defense, now going to the offense, let's grade the 2023 Packers offensive back skill. Let's start with rookie running back Emmanuel Wilson, undrafted out of Fort Valley State University. Pretty awesome story. He dazzled in the 2023 preseason, showed flashes in limited fashion as a rookie. Gil, in 7 games this year, he dealt with a shoulder injury. He suffered in a win over the Chargers, that dramatic win at Lambeau Field. Had 14 carries for 85 yards, averaged just over 6 yards per carries in that limited time. 4 catches for 23 yards out of the backfield. What kind of grade do you give Emmanuel Wilson, Gil?
Well, I mean, if I'm grading him on how his season went as compared to what expectations were when they first signed him, he's getting an A+.
Yeah.
But if I'm grading him on how he was on the field, I kind of go like with a C+, where I like his potential, but he hasn't proven anything yet. Yeah, the 6.1 yard average is great. It shows, again, the potential, but 14 carries over 7 games is not a very big sample size. If he can figure out the pass protection thing and the pass pattern thing consistently, I think he has the potential to be something in this league down the road, but he's got to show it and show it consistently. So I go C+, but with the arrow hopefully pointing up for Emmanuel Wilson. I like him.
I give him a B. I'm a little more generous just because he just went over and beyond expectations, where this guy wasn't even supposed to make the roster. But he was so good in the preseason that the Packers obviously looked at this as, hey, someone's going to pick this kid up, and we don't want to lose this guy because there's something there. Just the way in the scheme that the Packers run, Matt LaFleur's scheme, it's the same. It's a relatively similar scheme as what Sean McVay runs with the Rams and what Kyle Shanahan runs with the 49ers and what Mike McDaniel runs with the Miami Dolphins. It's a complex scheme. It's not easy for a running back to understand that. We've seen it where I'm just thinking the 49ers where they drafted Trey Sermon out of Ohio State in the 3rd round. Trey Sermon didn't get on the field because he couldn't figure out the offense. And It was that complex. And Trey Sermon was a good runner, but he just didn't understand it. Emmanuel Wilson seems to have a natural understanding of this scheme. And that's where I think is just such an underrated piece of this, where he could really be something. And I think it's a lot to grasp. I just don't think they wanted to throw him into the fire when they felt like, hey, AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones, they've been here, they've done that. If they're healthy, they're going to get the ball. They're going to be the main guys. And the whole offense was such a work in progress, too, where you had a bunch of receivers who were trying to get on the same page with the first-year starting quarterback. I think there are a lot of factors that were going against Emmanuel Wilson, but he's going to get an opportunity in camp next year and in preseason again. And who knows, that one of those running back spots could come down between Emmanuel Wilson and A.J. Dillon, like we were talking about earlier.
It could. I guess the fact that Dillon gives them a different skill set might work in his favor. But, you know, the thing also about Emmanuel Wilson, that injury, he was injured in the same game that Aaron Jones was injured in.
Yes.
And like, had he been healthy when Aaron Jones was hurt, he would have had so many more touches.
Yeah.
Even if he would have just moved up and gotten the touches that A.J. Dillon was getting, and Dillon would have taken the number 1 back touches, you would have just seen a lot more than 14 carries. The timing of his injury was very unfortunate.
Yeah, and he had a big run when he got hurt, too. It's just, and then I think he just got pulled by a defender, and it wasn't anything dirty or egregious. Nope. It's just one of those things that happens a lot in football where he went limp immediately, and you knew it's like, okay, that's a problem. Like that's something that hopefully he's strengthening up and everything. He's a big back, though. He's 5'11", 226, so he's not a small guy. Like he's pretty thick, and he's got some good speed, and he's got some good vision. I'm excited for the future of Emmanuel Wilson. I'm excited for training camp coming up to see what else he could do in a Green Bay Packer uniform. Another guy who's been around the block a few times, more than a few times with the Packers. Talk about Patrick Taylor. On and off the Packers 53-man roster this past year, per usual, like the previous few years where he's spent time with the practice squad, then he's been with the 53-man roster, then he's been a practice squad elevation, just on and off with the team. He appeared in 11 games this year with the Packers, 141 rushing yards, averaged 4.5 yards a carry, 11 catches for 49 yards. Gil, you know what you're going to get with Patrick Taylor, but he's kind of limited. What's your grade on Patrick Taylor from the year?
For me, it's a C. I mean, Patrick Taylor is reliable. He is not dynamic. He is going to pass block to the best of his ability, and he knows how to do it. He's going to catch the ball pretty well. He's going to run the ball pretty well, but he is, to me, the definition of steady, but not spectacular. He's reliable, but not dynamic. So, to me, he's a C. He's the kind of guy that'll help on special teams. Mm-hmm. You need guys like Patrick Taylor on your roster, but there are a lot of guys like Patrick Taylor out there. So, I like him, but I don't think he's indispensable. And the fact that they didn't offer him a contract still, to me, doesn't mean they won't bring him into training camp again. But, he if he's there, if someone gets hurt, you could always count on him to be there and be efficient.
For me, I give him a C as well. I agree with you and the big thing, he was getting all those practice squad elevations early in the year because Aaron Jones was hurt, and you could count on him to pass protect. And that's a big thing for Patrick Taylor is I wouldn't use a roster spot on him, but I could see him being back on the practice squad next year. He has spent so much time there, and with practice squad elevations, and there's no restrictions on what age and how many years that you can have of experience before you're not allowed on a practice squad again. Patrick Taylor has made a home on that practice squad and being that emergency back if need be. He's a C though. Like you're saying, he doesn't do anything dazzling, but he does his job. He doesn't make many mistakes, except for late 2-minute situations, under 2 minutes where he doesn't get out of bounds. That's just mind-boggling and infuriating, but hopefully he learns from that if he is in another game for Green Bay next year. I'll never forget that Giants game on Monday Night Football when he had an easy path to just sprint straight out of bounds. He went inbounds. Matt LaFleur burned a timeout and immediately started screaming at him. And that's how. And when Matt LaFleur was screaming, everyone at home on their couch was screaming through the television, "What are you doing?" So
get out of bounds.
It's that simple. But Patrick Taylor, if he's back on the practice squad, totally fine with that. Wouldn't use a 53-man roster spot on him next year, though. Next up, the mayor of Door County. We talked about him a little bit. A.J. Dillon this past season, 15 games, 613 yards, a career worst 3.4 yards per carry, only had 2 rushing touchdowns, 22 catches out of the backfield, and 223 receiving yards. He missed both playoff games with an injury. Gil, a pretty durable guy. A.J. Dillon, he's coming back. He's usually pretty good back to rely on when it comes to the cold weather football at the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. What's your grade, though, from A.J. Dillon this year?
It's tough. Because I grade based partially on expectations, in addition to performance, I got to go with a C+, close to a B-, but the expectations move it down in my mind to the C+. That yards per carry was problematic. He talked before the season, I have to run with a lower pad level. I have to run harder. And when Aaron Jones got hurt early in the season and he had the opportunity to carry the team, he still wasn't running with more intensity and lower pad level. Now, later in the season, he did get better in those areas, but sometimes timing is important. And when he could have carried the team's running load, he wasn't there. So I go with a C+, mostly because he didn't meet expectations.
I think the timing of A.J. Dillon, not Aaron Jones' injury early in the year, and I think the timing of that was so terrible because the Packers were a mess on offense. It was a young offense that was trying to figure stuff out, going through serious growing pains. And, of course, opposing defenses, they were just trying to shut down the run and just make Jordan Love beat them. And Jordan Love has proven, and we're going to talk about him in just a bit, Jordan Love has proven that he's a good NFL quarterback. But the receivers weren't running the right routes. They weren't on the same page. The blocking was all over the place. It was a big mess. And I don't necessarily put that on A.J. Dillon early there. I still give him a C. I'm not as generous with the grade as you are, Gil, just because there are times where he's tripping on his own feet and it didn't seem like he was seeing the field as well as he has in the past. But that Giants game, that Monday night loss, he actually played pretty well. And that's where it gave me some hope. Like, okay, things are starting to click. But I think it was more so how many issues were on that offensive side of the football, specifically with the passing offense early in the season when Aaron Jones was out, that A.J. Dillon couldn't get going because there was nothing there.
Yeah, and I think part of it also was not only did you have the tight ends and the wide receivers being inexperienced, but the offensive line was
Yeah.
unsettled. They
Yeah.
hadn't figured out how to deal with Bakhtiari's absence yet.
Hmm.
Rasheed Walker was still learning,
Yep.
uh, how to be a better left tackle, and I think his second half of the season was significantly better than the first.
Yes.
So a guy like AJ Dillon, he's not going to create yards. Like Aaron Jones can make something out of nothing a lot more frequently than AJ Dillon. So if the
Yeah.
offensive line isn't blocking and opening up holes for Dillon, he'll get you what's there. But if there's nothing there, he's not going to add a lot to it. And I think that also was a factor in his slow start.
And the numbers indicate that he's already starting to trend downwards from that second year when he was really, really good as the number 2 back. Again, that contract isn't guaranteed. His job is not safe, but I'm hoping AJ Dillon turns around. We need the mayor to stay, and his performance is going to determine that. You just talked about Aaron Jones. You mentioned him. He finished last season strong, 5 straight 100+ yard rushing games, including the playoffs. He was released, obviously, a few weeks ago. Now he's with the rival Minnesota Vikings on the other side of the Mississippi. Started 11 regular season games, 2 playoff games. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry, still pretty solid average, but that was his lowest average since 2019. 656 rushing yards, that was lowest total since his rookie year in 2017. 2 rushing touchdowns, 30 catches for 233 yards, both his lowest total since 2018, and 1 receiving touchdown. Gil, this was a guy where we were really sad to see him go. We're really, really sad to see that he's going to be wearing purple and gold next year. And we're going to have to face him twice a year and hopefully not get burned by it.
If he's healthy.
If he's healthy, that's the big thing. But what was your grade from Aaron Jones last year?
Well, a lot of factors. If I'm just looking at the last 5 games, the 2 playoff games, and the last 3 regular season games, A+.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But I can't just look at that. There were 17 games and 2 playoff games that I have to take into account. And, as they say, one of the most important abilities in the NFL is availability.
Mm-hmm.
He played 11 games, but he was probably only healthy for 4 of them in the regular season, then the 2 playoff games. So the season opener where he hurt his hamstring, and then those last 3 games where he had the 100+ yards. And after that, it was hit and miss with his availability. When I factor in the absences and the games where he was on a very small play count where 10 touches, he's going to get. And whenever he was on a play count, for some reason, Matt LaFleur gave him the ball 7 times on the opening drive. I never understood that. But I give him a B for the season just because of the fact that his numbers were a little bit down. The injuries definitely contributed. But, man, at the end, when he was healthy and ready to go, he was as good, if not better than ever.
Yeah, I give him like a B+, so B+.5 essentially. That's what I gave him. Because the way he ended the season was so strong, and the Packers were really clicking on offense, and he just proved to be so important and dynamic to the scheme and for that offense and everything. And it coincides. I mean, but the thing is, with his ability to be so good at the end of the year, that also coincided with Jordan Love just being on an absolute heater. It's again, we were just talking about that with AJ Dillon, where he didn't play very well when Aaron Jones was out because the offense was a mess. The passing game was all over the place. The blocking, the offensive line was in shambles at that point. And then they got their crap together, and Aaron Jones excelled because the offense was just clicking and banging on all cylinders. It sucks that he's not in Green Bay anymore, but you can't be emotional when you're the GM of the Green Bay Packers like Brian Gutekunst. You got to be cold and calculated, and his numbers indicated that he's trending downwards. And as the GM, you got to look out for not only now, but for the future of the organization, of the team. And it was a tough thing to swallow, but this Aaron Jones, he was very good last year, but who knows? This may be the last great season, last really or good season, quality season that he may have in the NFL. I'm not wishing ill will against him, but that's just the way it goes when these backs, get to that magic age of 30.
Yeah, I mean, I was not happy with the release of Aaron Jones, but I understood completely why it had to be done under the circumstances. So I will always be a huge Aaron Jones fan. I
Mhm.
appreciate everything he did for the Packers on and off the field. I respect him in so many different ways for the person that he is. But, you know, it was time, I think.
Yeah.
The old expression is better a year too soon than a year too late,
Mhm.
especially considering the fact that you weren't getting him on a minimum kind of a deal. Even if he
Yeah.
took a pay cut, it would still be, a nice chunk of change for a 29 going on 30-year-old back. So, with a heavy heart, I say goodbye to Aaron Jones as a Packer, but I think it was the right move, even though I didn't like it.
And this may mark the last time we talk about Aaron Jones until later this year when they have to face the Minnesota Vikings in the regular season. So best wishes to Aaron Jones. I hope you stink with the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm not rooting against the person, but I just hope your production isn't quite what it used to be. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
I don't wish it's for the sake of the Green Bay Packers, not against the Minnesota Vikings. It's for the sake of the Green Bay Packers. So that's just where I stand right there. And last but certainly not least, let's talk about the other offensive back, the quarterback, Jordan Love. First year as a full-time starter. He had a hot start to the season, had that lull in late September and October. The Packers stuck with him. Love stuck with it. He finished the season strong. After that Week 9 loss the Packers had at Pittsburgh, Love threw 18 touchdowns and 1 interception in the final 8 regular season games. He started every game. He completed just under 64% of his passes for 4,700 yards. That was 7th in the NFL. 32 touchdown passes. That was second most, only behind Dak Prescott. 11 interceptions, 7.2 yards per attempt. Gil, first year's the full-time starter. Jordan Love, I'm sold on this guy. What's your grade for Jordan Love?
I am also sold on this guy. I mean, in the second half of the year, he looked like one of the best, if not the best quarterback
Mm-hmm.
in the NFL. Outdueled Patrick Mahomes in that game
Yes,
that
he
the
did.
two teams played. Uh, I can't ignore what happened in late September to early November.
Yeah.
It's part of the grade. But you look at the overall numbers, he had better numbers last year than Aaron Rodgers had in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I give him a B plus with a arrow pointing way up.
And I give him an A minus, and I'm a little more generous because he was so good. And the biggest thing going into that 2023 season for the Packers, we were expecting a rebuild. We were expecting there to be a lot of struggles, which there were some struggles. But then when things were clicking, oh man, and they started to believe in themselves, holy crap! And the big question we wanted answered was, can Jordan Love play in the NFL? Can he play quarterback in the NFL? He absolutely can. He showed it for those last 8 regular season games, for that playoff win at Dallas where he was so good. He had a near perfect passer rating. The playoff loss against the 49ers, he had some good moments, but had a really rough fourth quarter. The big thing with Jordan Love, he needs to improve his late game decision making because he had some issues with the loss at Pittsburgh where he threw a bad interception where he was trying to hit Christian Watson in the end zone in the fourth quarter, and threw a really bad ball against the Las Vegas Raiders. He threw a game-ending interception. Against the Denver Broncos, he practically threw a game-ending interception. Against the 49ers, he threw game-ending interception as well, and 2 fourth-quarter interceptions. He needs to improve the late-game the decision-making, and his deep ball. That's just the areas of improvement. And I feel like those late-game decisions, he's going to get better with that with more time he has on the field. And this was his first year as the full-time starter, where this is only going to make him better. It was kind of rough. It was rough for those games that I just mentioned where he had those back-breaking INTs late in the game, but he's going to improve from that, and that just takes repetition and time, and I feel like he will improve from that. If he improves from that and his deep ball, the sky's the limit for him.
I am so looking forward. It was great watching him develop over the course of the season.
Yeah.
Where, in the second half of the year, you saw him making the exact same plays that he couldn't make in the first half of the year. And watching those receivers and tight ends and the first-year starting quarterback grow together was a joy as a football fan and as a Packer fan.
Oh, for sure. And with Jordan Love, too, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers' first year as the Green Bay starting quarterback. I'll just read off what Aaron Rodgers' numbers were. He completed 63.6% of his passes in year one as the Packers starter. Love, 63.7%. Rodgers threw for 4,038 yards, albeit in 16 games. Love threw for 4,765 yards. He threw for more yards per game in his first year in the NFL. First year as the full-time starter. 28 touchdown passes for Rodgers, 32 touchdown passes for Jordan Love. Pretty similar if we're going 16, 17 games. And then 13 interceptions for Rodgers. That was 2 more than Love, who had 11 interceptions, which is crazy. 10 interceptions of his were in the first 9 games of the year, and then he threw 1 the final 8 regular season games. That to me is just so efficient. That's so damn impressive. Rodgers, he threw for 7.5 yards per attempt. Love, 7.2 yards per attempt. So it's just eerie how similar it is, Gil. It's so eerie.
Let it continue to be similar as the development goes on, because yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. And I will say too, before we wrap up, it's so assuring seeing all the quarterback moves and transactions going on in the NFL this offseason, where former first round picks too, where Kenny Pickett gets traded, Justin Fields gets traded, Mac Jones gets traded, Zach Wilson, the Jets are trying to trade him. And you feel like Brian Gutekunst saw this coming, where that 2020 quarterback draft class was so good, and Gutekunst obviously felt, I need to get someone for the future, because the future quarterback classes don't look as promising unless they really stunk and somehow got Trevor Lawrence. But it was, I got to give kudos to Brian Gutekunst on this, because he made a very ballsy decision, very similar to Ted Thompson, what he did when he drafted Aaron Rodgers, when he had Brett Favre in-house. And it's paying off, and it's work, and it's essentially buying Brian Gutekunst some extra time as the general manager.
I mean, that is probably the biggest gamble he could have taken.
Yes.
And it paid off in spades. So yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, it was a rough couple of years. It was a rough few years in the public eye for Brian Gutekunst, but you're the GM, man. You can't listen to the fans. You start listening to the fans, you're going to be sitting with the fans. That's plain and simple. So kudos to Brian Gutekunst, because Jordan Love looks like the guy for the long-term future. Other grades, there were grades not given. We didn't give grades to veteran running backs James Robinson and Kenyon Drake. They were both with the Packers for a very short time. Each had 1 carry in a Packers uniform. Backup quarterback Sean Clifford, perfect 1-for-1 throwing the ball and averaging 37 yards per attempt in his NFL career as a rookie, but not enough to give a grade on Sean Clifford. No. But he had a pretty darn good 2023 preseason. We could have graded him off that, but it's preseason. We can't necessarily do that.
No, and look, I like his potential. I think his lack of arm strength will keep him from being a bona fide number 1 quarterback, but I think he can be a darn good number 2.
He's got to ball out in the preseason, then we could somehow get a day 2 pick from a team that's starving for a quarterback. So you got to hope it's Matt Flynn 2.0. Gil, before we wrap up with some trivia, what articles do you have coming up online for Packers Post, Cheesehead TV? You talked about wanting to bring back Rudy Ford. What else you got cooking online?
Well, for the Packers Post, I talked about 5 things that the Packers tend to look for in the NFL draft. So, what is it that they tend to do? What are their tendencies? What do they look for in players? How do they approach positions of need? I broke that all down on the Packers Post on Thursday, so check that out.
Sounds good to me, Gil. And are you ready for some trivia?
I am always ready for some trivia.
Well, we're recording on Thursday, March 21st, the first day of March Madness. NCAA tournaments for the men and women are here. There have been some great NFL players who have played college basketball back in the day. Includes Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez, future Hall of Famer Antonio Gates. That's a couple of guys to name who went on to have NFL careers after playing some college basketball as amateurs, as true amateurs back then.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah. Gil, name 3 former Packers who previously played college basketball.
3 former Packers who played college basketball.
I'll give you a hint. 1's on defense, 2 are on offense.
Former Packers, all of them.
Former Packers, yep.
Okay.
We talked about one of these guys a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Just think, not Salt.
Julius Peppers. Okay.
Yes. Yep. He played it.
Giving me too obvious there.
And the other two were former Packer tight ends.
Okay. I will go with Bubba Franks.
Not Bubba Franks.
Okay.
I'll give you another guess. But
and
hey, same school as Bubba Franks.
Same school, so Miami.
Yeah.
Gosh. Miami tight end.
And then with Jermichael Finley, that's a good guess, but not Jermichael Finley. But the other tight end played college basketball in the same state that Jermichael Finley played college football at.
I'm drawing a blank here.
All right, I will. I'll read them off. So you guessed Julius Peppers. He played at North Carolina. Jimmy Graham played for the Miami Hurricanes, and Martellus Bennett at Texas A&M. We talked about Peppers at North Carolina a few episodes ago. He's on his way to the Pro Football Hall of Fame because the guy was a freak athlete, obviously. Graham played 120 college basketball games in 4 years for the Hurricanes, averaged just over 4 points and 4 rebounds per game. Bennett played for the Aggies basketball team for 2 years, appeared in 30 games, averaged 1.5 points and 1.5 rebounds per game. Obviously, Bennett and Graham, very underwhelming Packer careers, but they were very good athletes. The Packers just kind of signed them at the wrong time in their career.
When they were already on the downside. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So, there you go, Gil. Some March Madness trivia because 'tis the season.
'Tis the season indeed. So that's a good thing. And looking forward to a lot of March Madness for sure. Well, that is going to do it for us today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter @Packers and @Packers. Stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackerssean@gmail.com. Make sure you subscribe to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. And of course, thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.